Hello everyone, I'm Dan Lamontagne. I'm going to do a brief history of Biddeford schools. So you should be out of here by 10 p.m. That's how brief it is. If I'm not loud enough, can everybody hear me okay? Just let me know. Don't be afraid to interrupt. Let's see, I'm focusing mainly on the buildings. So if anyone has any information or any questions as we go along, just don't be afraid to interrupt. So how many of you went to Biddeford schools? At least 1 year, we'll say. Okay, so let's start here. The early years. Dane York's book, titled The History and Stories of Biddeford, indicates the law required a grammar school if there were 100 families and a Latin school if there were 200 families, and that the first mention of a schoolmaster in the town records was in 1731. The first school was most likely in a private home. Town records from 1770 mention there were 4 schools, all in private homes. Town records from 1796 indicate a schoolhouse on or near Emery Street. In 1830, there existed 2 schoolhouses in Biddeford, one just off Lincoln Street near Pearl Street and one on Emery Street. So I found this map. It says it's from 1835 to 1840. So you can see the townhouse here, and it's on Schoolhouse Lane, which is Emery Street, because you have Foss Lane, which is Foss Street there. Dean's Hill is actually Main Street, and that leads down to the bridge and the river. And something interesting, I saw Dr. Horace Bacon lived over here, so Bacon Street must be named after him. And James Sullivan was a famous Biddeford person. I think he's featured. No, he's not featured back there, but Sullivan Street's named after him. So this is the Sullivan Street School. Anyone guess where it was located? As you'll see, most of the names of the early schools were the street on which they were located. So this was built or opened in 1846. I say built or opened because from the research I did, it didn't say, it started building that year or it was actually open that year. And this one was closed in 1913 when Emery School opened. And it later became the site of St. Andrew's School. I look at this picture and I see it's on flat land, and St. Andrews is, as you'll see this picture of that later, it's kind of on a slope. So this picture is from courtesy of MacArthur Library. They have an online catalog with all kinds of old pictures. So most of the pictures I used are from them. That's a good source. So then we have the Spruce Street School. This one was built or opened in 1847 and closed in 1918. Spruce Street is where Dupree Hardware is located. I don't know if you're familiar with that area. The land and building were sold to St. Mary's Parish in 1922. The Washington Street School is located at the corner of Jefferson Street and Washington Street. It was built in 1848 and was Biddeford's first high school. An addition was built in 1868 and it was demolished in July 1967 and is currently a parking lot. In 1889, a new school building was erected on Alfred Street and became the high school, and this Washington Street School was used as a grammar school. So that's the site now. You've got a parking lot, corner of Jefferson. You can see 7-Eleven there in the background, and the post office is right there. And here's a newspaper clipping of it being torn down in 1967. The clipping says that the school bell had also served as Biddeford's only fire alarm back in the day. And at the time of its demolition, this building was used for storage purposes. And here's a handsome group of 3rd graders in 1890. If anybody, I don't know if there's any family names in here. And looks like they wore uniforms. The boys in the front all seem to be dressed very similarly. The Pool Street School was also known as the School Street Schools. So you had the school and Pool Street School. And that was built or opened in 1856. And it was another one that closed in 1913 when Emory School opened. Foss Street School, this was also built or opened in 1856 and also closed in 1913 when Emory School closed. And here's a picture of some students in 1910. None of them seem to be smiling. So the Morrill School was built in 1860, and it's on the current DeCary Road, which was then the Pool Road. And I took this picture because I think this may have been it, this current house. But I look at the cupola, however you pronounce that, and this one seems very close to the peak, whereas that's set back. So I'm not 100% sure, but looks pretty close. So rural school number 8, built around 1861. The school district at Biddeford Pool was number 8. And the school was located at the site of the current Biddeford Pool fire station. That's the fire station. And you can see the Union Church in the background here. So I took this picture last month and I tried to show the Union Church steeple in the back, but that tree kind of blocks it out. Here's a school, here's a photo of students in 1909. 6 of them are Goldthwaits. That's a very popular name in Biddeford Pool. It says this picture was printed in the Biddeford Daily Journal in February 1952, but it's from 1909. Another 1909 photo. Apparently this teacher liked to take a lot of pictures, which is good. This is rural school number 3 on South Street around 1972. School hadn't been used as a school since the 1930s, thank goodness, because look at the shape this is in. It was also known as a poor farm school. And if you don't know what the poor farm was, at the end of where Main and South Street converge near Rotary Park, it was a social service provided by the city to people who were out of work, destitute, aged, or facing hard times for various reasons. People received food, clothes, and or shelter, and in return worked on the farm or did different kinds of labor for the city. The neediest lived on the farm itself. In the 19th century, it had a good reputation for providing simple but clean accommodations. However, most accounts state that the tenants lived in unpleasant conditions as the years went on. The farm continued to deteriorate and was closed in the 1960s. So here's, this one's rural school number 6, which was located off of Pool Road near Ferry Lane, and that section is now known as Secocas Road. So here are some other rural schools. District 10, the top upper left was on Elm Street. District 12 on the upper right was on Guinea Road, and District 3 was on South Street, that's the lower right, and all simple buildings. And we already talked about the Morrill School on DeCary Road. The Summer Street School was built in 1872. This photo is from 1901. It was another school that was replaced by Emory School in 1912. And Emory School was actually built on the same piece of land. And here's an 1894 class photo. So the Birch Street School was built in 1880. Anybody go to the Birch Street School? There we go. All right. So it was on Birch Street across from the current St. James School, right? Yeah. So it appears that the school was leased to St. Joseph's Parish in the 1950s and 1960s. And at some point the city started to use it for public school students again, but I couldn't determine what year this occurred. In 1977, the superintendent recommended that the school be closed, but I didn't find when it was actually closed. In December of 1994, it was burned by firefighters as a training exercise, and it's now a parking lot. The Bradbury Street School opened in 1880, and it was closed in 1963. In 1964, it was sold to the Disabled American Veterans and became the DAV's headquarters. That's what it currently looks like. It's across the street from the exit of St. Joseph's Church onto Bradbury. The Wentworth Street School. Don't have much about that one, except that it opened in 1883 and closed in 1977, so possible that some of you went there. Anybody? No? There it is, right there. And it's pretty much the same. They added stairs in the front. So St. Joseph's moved around a lot. There were 4 different locations in its history. And many of you were at my talk about Biddeford churches 2 years ago. I'm sure you'll remember that St. Joseph's Church's first home in 1870 was the former Alfred Street Methodist Church, which was on the corner of Alfred and Bacon Streets, where the police station is now. So 5 years later, in 1875, St. Joseph's School was started at that location. And it was Biddeford's first Catholic school, and instruction was taught in French by 3 lay women. These three ladies were teaching almost 400 students by 1881. So the pastor, Father Dupont, convinced the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary in Quebec to come to Biddeford to help teach the students. In 1882, classes were moved to the basement of the current St. Joseph's Church on Elm Street. And it's been a while since I've been in that basement, but 400 plus students must have been pretty crowded. So in September 1888, this school building on Birch Street, which is now the Parish Place Apartments, opened. So I don't know if you know where this location is, but if you're going up the hill on Alfred Street, take a ride on Birch Street, it's that first building on the right. And if you keep going up Birch Street, St. James is the next school. So there were 860 students by 1889, 1 year later, and that was more than the total public school enrollment in the city. And enrollment continued to climb with 1,100 students by 1896 and 1,300 students by 1900. So in 25 years, enrollment more than tripled, most likely due to the continuing influx of French Canadians. And we all know how they had such small families. From 1938 to 1948, the building housed St. Joseph's High School for girls. In 1949, the girls' high school moved into one of the new wings of St. Louis High School. So here's the Parish Place Apartments, the way the building looks now. Go back and forth. So this became the next home, the 4th home of St. Joseph's School, and it's now St. James School. So this actual building, St. Louis High School from 1930 to 1970, then St. Joseph's School from 70 to 92, and it's been St. James School since 1992. All right, this is the Biddeford High School on Alfred Street, which became the junior high. All right, well, it became the new high school in 1889. The original building was partially destroyed by a fire in 1893, but was quickly rebuilt and was ready for occupancy in 1894. And then in 1925, they added a rear section and a gymnasium. So in 1961, a new high school building opened on Maplewood Avenue, and this building became the Biddeford Junior High School. In 1989, the junior high school students moved to the new Biddeford Middle School building on Hill Street, and this building was no longer used as a school. By 1993, the building was in disrepair as it had been mostly vacant for several years, so the city of Biddeford decided to renovate it and convert it into a community center. The renovation project was made possible through federal and state grants, city funds, donations, and fundraisers. During this time, Biddeford City Councilor J. Richard Martin promoted the renovation project and donated his time as a consulting engineer, and the community center was renamed in his honor shortly after he passed away in 1998. So here's the Biddeford High football team in 1893. Great uniforms. Don't know about the helmets, if there were any.
This is a photo of the 1913 senior class on their trip to Washington, D.C. They were a very well-dressed group. Here's a girls' basketball team in 1914. The uniforms seem to have changed a bit since then. Here's the 1923 football team. This was Steve White's first year of coaching at Biddeford High. One of the gyms at the current high school is named for him. And Steve White is right here in the upper left corner. St. Mary's School was built in 1892. It opened in 1894 with 215 pupils. The school closed in 1992, so it was open almost 100 years. St. Joseph's, St. Mary's, and St. Andrew's schools merged in 1992 and became St. James School, utilizing the St. Joseph's School building on the corner of Graham and Birch Streets. St. Mary's was demolished in November of 2001 to make way for a Dunkin' Donuts building. Here are photos of the demolition in 2002. And here's the Dunkin' Donuts on the site, which is currently there. St. Andrew's School is located on Sullivan Street. The school was formed in 1901. However, construction on the school building only began in 1925 and opened for classes in September 1927. Between 1901 and 1927, classrooms were set up in nearby houses and in the church basement. The first classes were taught by the Sisters of the Good Shepherd, who resided at St. Joseph's Convent and traveled across town daily. In 1904, 9 Sisters of the Presentation of Mary arrived to teach the 615 students at the school. Enrollment continued to increase, and so did the sisters needed to teach the classes, so the parish built a new convent in 1915. When the school building opened in September 1927, there were 1,200 students. By 1945, enrollment was 1,900 students. In 1940, a high school for girls was also in this building. The high school offering ceased in 1968. The school closed in 1992 and was merged into St. James as previously discussed. The St. Andrew's School building was sold and became apartments for senior citizens in 1998. Records from 1917 and 1945 indicate that the 3 parochial schools had 3 times the enrollment of Biddeford's public schools in those years. This photo is from 1925 according to the library, but that's the year construction began, so this picture must actually be taken a few years later. Here's a picture I took in 1997. The school had been closed for 5 years at that point. Here's a picture I took recently. They are now senior apartments. Here's a photo of students from 1900. I went to St. Andrew's School from kindergarten through 8th grade. Here's our 1977 graduating class. That is our board member, Paul McDonough, in the center of the second row. Right there. In the 6th grade in 1975, we walked into our afternoon history class, which Sister Scholastica had taught for 3/4 of the year, and were informed that Mr. McDonough was our new teacher for the rest of the year. Paul also moved up to 7th grade, so I had him as a teacher in 7th and 8th grade. Standing next to Paul is Sister Irene. She used to ring a handbell when it was time for the 7th and 8th graders to go to lunch. She used to line up her class ready to go, and then she rang the bell, so our class was always first in the cafeteria line. One day we talked Mr. McDonough into heading for lunch before Sister Irene rang the bell. I remember the look on Sister Irene's face as we walked by her with bell in hand. When we got back to class after lunch, apparently Sister Irene had had a talk with Mr. McDonough, and he told us he would never let us talk him into doing anything like that ever again. Emory School was built in 1912 and classes began in 1913. It's located on the corner of Hill and Birch Streets. It was named in honor of Thomas Emory, who taught in Biddeford schools for 25 years from 1865 to 1890. It cost $63,277 to build. It was home to half of Biddeford's public school students at the time, as the Summer Street, School Street, Sullivan Street, and Foss Street schools were closed. The school closed in December 1990 upon completion of the new primary school on Outer Hill Street. Grades 1 through 3 were moved to the new primary school, and grades 4 and 5 were moved to Kennedy School. The St. Louis Child Care Center leased the building from 1993 until 2007. Thereafter, the building remained empty for a few years. It was then converted into 24 affordable apartments for seniors, which were ready for residents in October 2012. In compliance with the terms of the Historic Tax Credit Program, the conversion to residences required that the historical integrity of the building be maintained. This is a photo from 1955. Here's a photo of Thomas Emory from 1880. Here's a 2018 photo of the school. Here are students in 1913. St. Louis High School opened in 1930 and was located at the corner of Graham and Birch Streets. It is currently the home of St. James School. It was financed by St. Joseph's Parish and Father Arthur DeCary, who was the pastor at St. Andrew's Parish. In 1948, 2 new wings were added to the school building. In 1949, St. Joseph's High School students, which were all girls, were moved to the St. Louis High School building. The boys and girls were segregated in different wings of the building. I read something that said that in 1968 the classes were co-ed, but that source did not indicate if that was the first time they were co-ed. So when I did the talk live, there were some people who had attended St. Louis High, and they said that there was a door that was manned by one of the nuns to make sure that no girls or boys went into each other's wings. And one lady also said she took a chemistry class and that girls did not usually take that class, so she was permitted to cross over to go into the chemistry class, which was all boys other than her. St. Louis High School closed in 1970. In September of 1970, the building became the home of St. Joseph's Grammar School, which had been in the building, which is now Parish Place Apartments, that I talked about under St. Joseph's School. Also, as previously discussed, St. Joseph's, St. Mary's, and St. Andrew's schools merged in 1992 and became St. James School, utilizing this building. There was a school naming contest among the incoming 8th graders, and Mike Preventure came up with St. James. It's a combination of letters of the 3 schools that were merged. J is for Joseph, A is from Andre, and M is from Mary. Here's a 2025 photo of the building. I just found a picture of this high school varsity letter from 1965. The Biddeford High School on Maplewood Avenue opened in 1961. The vocational school building opened in 1969 and is known today as the Biddeford Regional Center of Technology. There was a large influx of students when St. Louis High School closed in June of 1970. City voters approved an addition to Biddeford High School in 1971, and that addition was completed in 1973. City officials had considered leasing St. Louis High School while the addition was being built, but it was determined that the cost for leasing would exceed the cost of double sessions. Therefore, double sessions were instituted for the school year beginning in September of 1970 and continued until the addition opened in January or February of 1973. Double sessions for the 1970-71 school year were juniors and seniors went from 7:20 a.m. to 12:13 p.m. Freshmen and sophomores went from 12:20 to 5 p.m. The entire building was renovated beginning in 2010 and was completed in 2012. It currently serves grades 8 through 12. This photo is a picture I took in 2009 prior to the start of the 2010 renovation project. Here's how it looks now. Here's my 1981 graduating class. There were 314 of us. Our board president, Alan Casimir, was our class advisor and my junior year U.S. history teacher. John F. Kennedy Memorial School is located on West Street. It was dedicated in November 1965. It had served pre-kindergarten and kindergarten, but is now closed. It closed in June of 2025. There's an addition being built on the Biddeford Primary School. The students from the former Kennedy School are going to be split among a few schools until the primary school addition is completed. Here's a 1973 photo of JFK School. Biddeford Primary School is located on Hill Street. It opened in December of 1990. It originally served grades 1, 2, and 3, which were moved from Kennedy School and Emory School. It currently serves grades 1 and 2. An addition is in process and is due to be open later in 2025. Here's a picture of that addition in progress. I took this in May of 2025. Biddeford Intermediate School is also located on Hill Street. It's a good thing they stopped naming the schools based on the street on which they were located like they did in the 1800s, since there are now 3 schools on Hill Street. This building opened in 1989 as Biddeford Middle School. A new middle school was opened in 2006, and this building was renamed Biddeford Intermediate School. It currently serves grades 3 and 4. Biddeford Middle School is also located on Hill Street. It opened in October of 2006. It currently serves grades 5 through 7. The Marie Joseph Academy. The original building was the Evans Hotel, which was later renamed the Ocean View Hotel. It was built in 1898. It was purchased by the Order of the Presentation of Mary in 1948 and was converted into a boarding school, the Marie Joseph Academy. In 1978, the school became the Marie Joseph Spiritual Center. The building was closed in June 2023. It was in need of extensive repairs. The Biddeford Pool Land Trust purchased the property in September 2023 for $9 million. One of the conditions of the sale was that the site be restored to its natural state and a conservation easement be established on the property. It was demolished at the end of 2023. I took this photo in January 2024. I took this photo on May 14, 2025. You can see that the restoration of the site to its natural state has begun. The Stella Maris School was an orphanage and Catholic girls' school founded in 1931. It was formerly the Judge Rishworth Jordan House. The Rishworths, tough name to say, were prominent Biddeford citizens dating back to the 1600s. Here's a recent photo of the Stella Maris building on the grounds of the University of New England. Lastly, we have St. Francis College and High School and the University of New England. In the 1930s, Father Arthur de Carey, the pastor of St. Andrew's Parish in Biddeford, turned to the Franciscan Order in Montreal to establish a high school and junior college to educate young Franco-American men, especially with an eye toward the priesthood. The Franciscan High School opened in 1939. The initial enrollment was 14 ninth graders. The cost of attending was $200 a year, which included board, room, tuition, books, sports equipment, and transportation to and from the railroad station. In 1952, the Franciscans decided to transform the institution into a 4-year liberal arts college, which became St. Francis College. For the first few years, they continued the high school, but in 1958, they began to phase it out. By 1961, it was solely a college. In the 1960s, St. Francis began holding a series of symposia addressing contemporary issues, which brought to the campus many of the nation's civil rights leaders, including Martin Luther King Jr. In 1967, women were fully admitted for the first time. Enrollment continued to swing upward, reaching its peak in the 1969-70 school year with 730 students. In the early 1970s, the Franciscans decided to withdraw from administration and control of the college, turning its ownership over to a board of lay people. During the 1970s, enrollments at St. Francis College and at small liberal arts colleges throughout the Northeast began to drop, with many colleges closing their doors. St. Francis College transformed itself to survive by offering programs in the biological sciences, human services, and business administration. The New England College of Osteopathic Medicine was added in 1978, and the combined schools became the University of New England. In 1996, the university merged with Westbrook College in Portland. In 2025, UNE is home to more than 9,000 students. It has campuses in Biddeford and Portland and one in Morocco.